Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the program, The Mace. I am Rosemary Ukokotega. In today's package, Bill to protect workers in informal sector scales second reading on the floor of the Senate. House of Representatives wants contractor handling reconstruction of Abuja-Kaduna Expressway resume work immediately. And lawmakers speak on independence of the legislature as Nigeria marks 62nd anniversary this Saturday. For details of this and more, stay with us on DSTV channel 392, StarTimes TV channel 127, Free TV channel 507, on the UHF band on channel 38. You can as well download the app for Android at the Google Play Store, and for iOS devices, download the app at the App Store.
We are a nation blessed with people of diverse cultures, religions, languages, and opinions. It is ironic that we are now being ripped apart by our greatest strength, our diversity. We have allowed intolerance, insensitivity, bigotry, and nepotism to blind our vision of the greatness we can achieve working together as one. We may not have the same culture, nor religion, nor language, but we all belong to the same nation by the divine will of God. We did not choose to be Nigerians. Nigeria chose us. This nation is our divine heritage, and if we open our eyes, we will realize that what divides us pales in comparison to what unites us. And by the comparison and conciliation of our differences, we will grow until our differences disappear. Our unity cannot be willed by mere declarations, nor do we get unity by ignoring the questions that beg for answers. We must celebrate our diversity and debate our differences without fracturing our unity. Our strength is not in our numbers, but in our unity, because even the weak become strong when united. Nigeria unite. This message is brought to you by Abuja Broadcasting Corporation, owners and operators of ASO Radio 93.5 FM Abuja, ASO Television StarTimes Channel 127, Free TV Channel 507, and UHF Channel 38.
Thanks for staying put on the Maze with me as we take off from the Red Chamber. Quite a number of activities went on at the Senate within the week. On bills, senators debated and passed for second reading a bill seeking to formalize employment of domestic workers, apprenticeship, interns, and other informal sector employees in Nigeria, as sponsored by Senator Mohammed Sani from Niger State. Senator Sani, while presenting the bill, said the piece of legislation, when it becomes a law, would empower the National Directorate of Employment, NDE, to issue license and monitor privately owned agencies. Let's now have Senator Sani on the general principle of the bill with contributions from some of his colleagues.
The second reading of the Informal Sector Private Employment Agencies, Regulation Bill 2022 SB 541. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Musa Mohammed Sani to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues permit me to lead the debate. The bill was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Tuesday, 20th October 2020. The informal sector is usually regarded as the residual labor market, where labor is highly heterogeneous and sources of income are not largely wage dependent. Working time is discretionary and some work jobs are not paid at all. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the wide range of information available is that the operation in the sector are usually in small scale, that production techniques is labor intensive, and that ownership is usually private. In most cases, The workers in this sector are family members, apprentices, and few paid employees. Issues in informal sector labor practice within the informal sector of Nigerian economy show evidence of violation of employees' rights and non-implementation of labor regulations. Although the informal sector provides a safety net for skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled labor who could not find job in the formal sector of the labor market, however, informal sector in Nigeria has practices that are not in conformity with International Labour Organization, ILO, best practices, as ratified in its conventions. Notwithstanding that Nigeria is a signatory to these conventions, there are still a lot of deficits in the implementations of these conventions. One of such areas of concern relates to decent work deficit. Decent work is work with fair and equal treatment, decent remuneration, and fair conditions of employment, safety and social protection, opportunities for training and development, and collective bargaining. The primary goal of this bill is to regulate this sector to promote strategic objectives, the promotion of rights at work, employment, social protection, and social dialogue. On the contrary, many jobs in the informal labor market in Nigeria still experience decent work deficit. Employees in the informal sector are often seen as having no rights and are not treated fairly by their employers. All of these bill seeks to correct. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this bill empowered the National Directorate of Employment to issue license and monitor the activities of employment agencies throughout the country. The National Directorate of Employment therefore shall, A, on an application from an agency who desired to function as an employment agency in the prescribed format, issue a license after having been duly satisfied that, 1, the agency is registered either as a sole proprietorship, partnership firm, company, or as non-profit organization. 2, the agency maintains proper books of accounts, memorandum of association, rules, bylaws, as the case may be, and the details of the office bearers of the organization and details of persons employed by such agency. There is no criminal case pending against the said agency or agency owners or both. 4, the premises or place being or to be used for purpose of placement or employment agency exists as per requirement and be by the notification in the federal government gazetted. 1, appoint such persons, being officers of the National Directorate of Employment, as it thinks fit to be licensing officers, and define the limits within which a licensing officer shall exercise the jurisdictions and powers conferred on licensing officers under this bill. Given the importance of this informal sector to our national economy, I urge my distinguished colleagues to support this bill for the second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I stand to lend my support or to support this bill as ably moved by Senator Sani Musa. To me, Mr. President, both the content of the intent of the bill are most timely and relevant to the modern day Nigeria. Globally, Mr. President, this private sector is purely regulated in the interest and for the interest of every citizen of any of those countries above, including Nigeria. So I think the bill cannot come at a better time. I therefore second this bill.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, what happens in this informal sector, especially of work, where employees are being treated either fairly or unfairly, some are abused and the like, is one that calls for concern, because the informal sector perhaps is the largest part of our economy because it's largely unreported. However, as much as we have this issue of indecent work as this bill seeks to protect, the other aspect I would also like us to highlight is there are also situations where these same informal workers have had cause to deal with those who employ them. And I think one case in point is the murder of the past, or is the former deputy governor of Edo State, Lucky Igbenedion. I think that was one case where the old woman was hacked to death by an informally employed person who was put in her own care. So what this tells me, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, is that as much as we have many of these employees being treated unfairly or indecently, we also have to remember the other side of the story, where they also have had cause to deal with those who employ them unfairly and the like. So the role this agency is going to play, I think, should look at both sides, so that we protect those who are also employing, at the same way we are also protecting those who are being employed. I think if this is not properly captured, that also should be looked at. Now, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, one interesting thing this will help us to do also is whatever registration format is going to be adopted, we must link it up to our national database. It must be a compulsory requirement for them to have NIM registration, for example, where we know who they are, because there is also this aspect of, non-Nigerians, particularly from some of the West African countries, who also come into this country. They are employed, and there are a lot of very bad stories of how they wipe people's house, pack all their valuables, and just disappear. So I think, Mr. President, we need to really look at this aspect so that this bill can actually achieve the objective through and through. With these few comments, I support this bill and urge my colleagues to support it for the second reading.
Those against say nay.
The bill was then referred to the Committee on Labor and Productivity by President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, for further legislative input. The committee is expected to report back in 4 weeks. Another event at the Red Chamber within the week was the clearing of the nominee for Commissioner, Benue State Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Dr. Oliver Agundu, of alleged partisanship by the Senate Committee on INEC. Chairman of the committee, Senator Kabiru Geya, maintained there was no merit in the petition that Dr. Agundu was a card-carrying member of the main opposition, People's Democratic Party, PDP. Dr. Agundu, who had, while appearing before the committee, insisted there was no iota of truth in the petition filed against him, added it was a calculated attempt to tarnish his image and stop his appointment. A group, National Forum for Strict Adherence to Justice, had in a petition dated 27th of July 2022 and signed by Mr. Todo Akuma, addressed to the chairman of the committee, alleging it had material evidence suggesting that the nominee lecturer at Benue State University, who is now INEC resident electoral commissioner nominee for Benue State, is an alleged registered member of the party, PDP. From the floor of the Green Chamber, representatives within the week asked the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing to urgently get to site contractor handling the reconstruction of the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway, beginning with the Jere stretch, for immediate completion. Members, while adopting a motion of urgent national importance brought by a colleague, Mr. Garba Dati, and 38 others, called on the federal government to deploy all necessary security personnel and resources to enable the contractor resume without risk to personnel and equipment.
The Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, SAN, announced that the Federal Executive Council had approved the contract for the rehabilitation of Abuja-Kaduna Zaria-Kano Expressway, among other approvals, with a delivery date of December 2022. Equally recalls that the Honorable Minister announced that the firm, which had initially been contracted to undertake the rehabilitation of the road, Julius Berger PLC, will also be responsible for the reconstruction of the road. Further recalls that following concerning incessant and rampant incident of banditry along the Abuja-Kaduna highway, the contractor withdrew its workers from the road for security reasons. Note that at the time of the withdrawal by the contractor, at least one half of the stretch of the road had been graded and covered only in laterite, which after the intense rainfall of the past few months has given way to gouges and potholes that have left the road unmotorable and severely slowed down traffic, such that the journey that will ordinarily last 1.5 hours now took 3 hours to complete. Further notes that because of the current condition of the road, it only takes for a vehicle or a truck to break down on it for a few minutes, and it will result in a build-up to static traffic. The stress that this was exactly what happened on the road, that is, a truck broke down on the road, as a result of which there was massive gridlock on the road, and this gridlock was cleared only after about 5 days. Distrust that, to worsen matters, the gridlock that was occasioned recently often left motorists and commuters stranded on the road, sometimes for between 6 to 9 hours, on a journey that should last not more than 1.5 hours.
The lawmaker expressed worry that although the security situation has recently improved along that stretch of the road, the incessant gridlock still exposes commuters to bandit and terrorist attacks.
Worried that the situation on the Abuja-Kaduna highway has become a debilitating drawback for the Nigerian economy, that if not immediately rectified, spells doom for the economy and social life of Nigerians, contrary to Section 15, subsection 1 of the Constitution, which mandates the Nigerian state to provide adequate facilities for and encourage free mobility of people, goods, and services throughout Nigeria, as well as Section 41, subsection 1, which guarantees the right to freedom of movement throughout Nigeria to every Nigerian. Determine that the aforementioned circumstances have made it urgent that the contractor, Julius Berger PLC, be immediately brought back to site to complete this phase of the contract, especially the stretch between Jere and Kaduna.
The House therefore mandated its Committee on Works to liaise with the Minister of Works and Housing, as well as the heads of the relevant security agencies, to ensure the implementation of all resolutions and report to the House within 3 weeks. Still from the floor of the Green Chamber, a number of bills were debated and passed different readings during plenary. Prominent among those passed for second readings are a bill seeking to establish Office of Budget Management and provide a legal framework for budget process management in Nigeria, sponsored by the Speaker, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, and Mr. Henry Nwawuba. A bill for the establishment of the National Religious Harmony Commission, still co-sponsored by the Speaker, Mr. Gbajabiamila, and Chairman House Committee on Rules and Business, Mr. Hassan Fulata, as well as a bill for the establishment of Security Services Welfare Commission, also sponsored by the Chairman, House Committee on Army, Mr. Abdulrazak Namdas. Another bill for an act to prohibit late payment on the payment of workers' wages, pension and other emolument in Nigeria, and prescribes penalties for violation and for related matters, sponsored by Speaker Gbajabiamila, alongside a bill for an act to amend the Evidence Act Cap E14 laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 to bring its provisions in line with global technological advancements in evidence taking, which shall be applicable to all judicial proceedings in or before courts in Nigeria and for related matters, as sponsored by Mr. Ifeanyi Moma and Mr. Ugonna Ozurigbo, passed second reading.
A bill for an act to establish the Office of the Budget Management of the Federation and provide a legal framework for budget process management in the federal government of Nigeria to ensure effective regulation of budget preparation, presentation, implementation, and auditing, and for related matters, House Bill 2063. I so move.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to present before the House for a second reading approval on a bill for an act to amend the Trafficking in Persons, that is Prohibition, Enforcement and Administration Act, CAP T23, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to make provisions for enhanced efficiency in the operations of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, review the mode of appointment of the Director General of the agency, strengthen the composition of its governing board, and review the offenses and penal provisions, and for related matters. Sponsored by order of my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I so move.
Basically, Mr. Speaker, you know, in the criminal justice system, when you tender evidence, there are two main considerations. That is the admissibility of the evidence and its relevancy. That's admissibility and relevancy of the evidence being tendered. So basically, the defect this amendment is trying to cure is to further enhance electronic mode of evidence when it comes to admissibility and its relevancy.
Please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Other bills which passed third readings include an amendment bill to repeal the National Lottery Act No. 6 of 2017 and enact the National Gaming Bill to regulate the operation and business of gaming in Nigeria and enhance revenue generation for the government of the Federation to complement the funding gap of the Commission and for related matters. Back on some motions which were equally adopted during plenaries within the week. The House adopted a motion on the need to address the effect of rain disaster in Barutin local government area of Kwara State as moved by Mr. Muhammad Omar Bill. To this effect, the House urged the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing to include the reconstruction of the bridge connecting the Republic of Benin and Nigeria in the 2023 budget estimates, and for the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development and the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA to provide relief materials to victims in the affected communities, among other resolutions.
Chikanda is an international border community in Barutin local government area of Kwara State. Also note that the community is connected to the Republic of Benin through a bridge. Cognizance of the need for urgent intervention by relevant agencies of government to reconstruct the bridge connecting Republic of Benin and Nigeria to ease the movement of goods and services. Mandate the committee on emergency and disaster preparedness and legislative compliance to ensure implementation and report back within 8 weeks for further legislative action. The Right Honourable Speaker, my dear honourable colleagues, I so move.
As a way of rounding off the program for today, we bring you a special session with some lawmakers on the country's 62nd independence anniversary. The Mace had a one-on-one with some members of the House of Representatives on contributions of the legislature to Nigeria's democracy and on independence of the 9th Assembly. Some senators also spoke on the same subject.
In terms of how we have fared as a nation generally, one thing you have to take away is that we are still one indivisible and united country, despite the strains and pulls of the 60s leading to the Civil War, the crisis of June 12, and all that. These were crises that had the capacity to really split or tear the place apart, yet we're still one nation. So take that home and say, we're still one nation and we're doing well. And then second, if you approach it from the angle of democratic dispensation, you will also give ourselves credit that we'll be able to run an unbroken democratic dispensation for nearly going to 24 years. Because we started preparing in 1998 and all that. So that is one thing. And then so many other countries are looking up to us. And on the same score, we've been able to try to, ensure that there's stability within our sub-region by ensuring that our neighbors and all that they also toe the democratic line. We know that it's not all rosy, but if we get our acts together, of course, everyone will benefit because it ensures that those provisions that are there in the Constitution, 36, 40, freedom of association and all that we're having all these things as against when you were in military dictatorship.
Let's go back to the legislature. How has the legislature evolved all these years?
Well, I have even, partly answered the question. As we had the military intervention in '66, it terminated everything that we were able to do in building the legislative arm of government over time. All the constitutional conferences, when we started, what they used to call the Central Legislature, which is today the House of Representatives, in 1952. So beginning from then going on until the military struck, in '66, that terminated the activities of politicians, legislators and all that. And, it snowballed into a prolonged military rule from that time until, 1979. There was nothing like, the legislature. So that's why people don't even know that the number one arm of government is the legislative arm of government. If you go and read your constitution now, you see that it's there in section 4. But because of the absence, everyone talks about the executive and all that. But in terms of how the legislature has performed over the years, we've done well. It's like trying to learn left hand at an old age. We've done well, we are making progress, and the good news is that we have now had speakers and Senate presidents who were able to serve out their time without being impeached, as was rampant, in the early days of this democratic dispensation. So that's one. Then two, we have also been able to pass far-reaching, laws that have impacted positively, meaningfully, productively on the well-being of our citizens. These are some of the contributions we have made. And if you want to start, you want to talk about the NDDC, you want to talk about the EFCC, you want to talk so many other laws that we have passed. You want to talk about the Petroleum Industry Act, recently passed. And of course, the top of the ladder, the Electoral Act 2022, that has restored confidence, rekindled interest in democratic practice, because Nigerians are now beginning to know that, look, our votes will count. So we have done well. And of course, you will not forget the Climate Change Act, which I sponsored. So when you line all these things up, you see that we're making progress. We just need to build on this.
And lastly, sir, what would be your independence message and as a chief celebrant with Nigeria?
My message would be just let's remain together. Let those in leadership truly demonstrate that they are in leadership. Let them not be in leadership for their personal aggrandizement. Let them be in leadership, knowing that people stayed in the sun and under the rain to use this one to elevate you. And when you are elevated, you are answerable to them. If you have that in your mind and you demonstrate it, you will not have a problem. We'll be able to reduce the tension. We'll be able to bring the youths, the young ones on board. We'll be able to find them things to do. And that way, we'll march on. Because it's a nation with immense potential. If you talk about human, you talk about mineral, you talk about everything. Even when we are talking about climate change, the things we have, wind, sun, hydro, what some other nations don't have it. So we can do so much.
The parliament is what makes democracy democracy. Because in the event if there's a monarchy, you still have the king and you still have the judiciary.
And I think the parliament since the Fourth Republic has done extremely well.
And if we cast our mind back in the last few years, the
landmark bills have been passed into law. So, yeah, I will give
the parliament kudos. On the scale of 1 to 10, maybe 9.
That's huge.
Oh, yeah.
Can we truly say the legislature has been truly independent?
I will say in the 8th Assembly, there was a bit of independence, and that eventually led to the fallout, or rather from when at the beginning of the 8th Assembly, there was that romance to some extent between the Parliament and the executive, because you remember then the Senate President and the Speaker of the House emerged based on their goodwill. The House voted for them without interference from the executive, or to a large extent without the party. Their party they're not produced by their party. So initially I could tell that the then Speaker was working with the executive, but it got to a point the relationship deteriorated and they became their own people, So, and we enjoyed it. The executive couldn't force anything on us. There were times when we met joint meeting where they would say, look, this is what we are going to do, this is what the president is trying to do, but we're going to stop it and all that. And it was fun. And that's what we should do. Because I keep saying, when the executive and the parliament are in a cozy relationship, you should be careful, because it will throw the electorate under the bus, But I think that's particularly what's played out in this 9th Assembly. And it's understandable, because the president at different times called meetings of their party leaders and the members-elect then, and campaigned for this present leadership, the presiding officers, campaigned for them, gave the members-elect then instructions to vote for them. So having done that, I think it will be difficult for these presiding officers to work against the executive.
Is it really about working against the executive or protecting the country's interests?
Yeah, you have just put it the right way. It's doing the right thing, because like they say, our oath of office is to the country, not to an individual. But in this part of the world, that's where we see it. So when you are doing the right thing, as against the will of the man that campaigned for you to get there, it's as if you are working against such a person. That's the mindset here. And we have seen that again and again. Because even now, if you notice, you cover the House, we don't debate anymore. We don't debate motions like we used to do. We debate, we open up everything. But these days, we don't do that. And I can tell you where they might say it's COVID, but the simple reason for that is because nobody wants you to throw things at the executive, at the president. So everything is hush, 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 and that's it. That is not good enough for democracy. But in all this, we have been able to push out very sensitive bills. That's the one I celebrate. But as in a democracy, you must have a vibrant parliament. And I cannot tell you that this 9th Assembly is as vibrant as we would have wished, which is unfortunate. But I celebrate the bills, because those bills are making huge impact in the lives of Nigerians. Nigeria has achieved a whole lot, although for some of us we don't see this. But, we are allowed to celebrate 62, and God is taking us somewhere. Happy independent anniversary, and God bless you all.
When we have a parliament, that is where you have democracy. But when you don't have a parliament, it is the other arms of government are surviving, like the judiciary and the executive, they survive even during military rule. But when it is democratic rule, we have the National Assembly. A National Assembly contributes to the development of the nation in terms of the budgeting and other things, like the projects that were not done many years back. This administration have started completing those projects, and that was also a factor by the National Assembly. So many bills we have done in the National Assembly, they are making impact to Nigerian survival or the democracy of Nigeria, like the Electoral Act, which was a popular bill, which was passed by my committee and then supported by Nigerians. This is a bill that Nigerians have contributed greatly in it, and that the product of it is the product of contributions by Nigerians. So therefore, a legislative arm of government is the three-tier of government that makes democracy more active and more progressive. We are making progress. All my appeal to Nigerians is let us support our leaders Anytime we criticize our leaders, they end up making mistakes, but if you support them, they will do better. And if they do better, it is the Nigerians that benefit. So I'm appealing to all Nigerians to support the leadership. Whoever comes as a leader, because we are electing them, whoever comes as a leader, let's support him. Let him do his best. When the next group comes, then they will also try to improve better on what the others have done. I'm happy to rejoice with all Nigerians for getting these 62 years of independence. And I hope and pray that the next few years will still be better than the last years we have passed through, so that Nigeria can move to a higher height. I think Nigeria is climbing steps to a higher glory.
A lot has happened by virtue of legislative action, coming from the National Assembly. And if you look at our polity, you see that a lot of stability is coming into play, and even our economy. Part of what the National Assembly has been able to do was to put in place all different manners of legislation that will ensure to stabilize our democracy and stabilize our economy. The electoral bill that was passed into law and signed into law by Mr. President was one piece of legislation that this National Assembly wanted to be able to leave behind as a legacy. And there is no doubting the fact that the days of election riggers are numbered, in this country, in this democracy, and within this polity by virtue of that law. And there's also no doubting the fact that the petroleum industry bill that we passed, which was also signed into law, is helping to stabilize things within the oil and gas sector, which is a major aspect of our economy and a major source of revenue for us as a nation. We have been able to also put in place different other forms of legislation, which for me will have on the long run a major positive impact on the stability of this polity and the economy.
Happy 62nd Independence, Nigeria. And it's a wrap on the Mace today. See you next week. I am Rosemary Ukokotega.